it's really hard to have that mindset of I'll do that when, because unfortunately, oftentimes the when doesn't happen. A really good example of that is somebody saying, well, I'll start tracking my finances when I make X amount of dollars. What if you not tracking your finances stops you from making X amount of dollars? I'll do the inner work when I find my dream partner. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode number 123, a simple trick to get more aligned guests. Today, for episode number 124, seems a little negative. I promise we're going to do our best to make it positive. Podcasters with this mindset just can't win. I remember we had an opportunity to interview a very big guest. His name's David Meltzer. He's very big in our space, very successful entrepreneur, very successful podcaster, got a lot going on, very successful business owner. And we had already done a virtual interview with him, and it went really well, and he was impressed, and we ended up staying in touch with him, staying in touch with his team, and he became a mentor, just not like he would be in the future. And we found out that he was coming to Boston, and we lived like an hour outside of Boston at the time. Alan and I, we lived very close to each other, like 30 minutes from each other. And we had this conversation, and we said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to book a hotel room, and we're going to see if we can interview him in person. And we're going to make this work, and we're going to figure it out. We're going to do whatever it takes. We booked a hotel room before we even got the verbal yes. And we were struggling financially. It's not like we had a ton of money. I think the hotel room was like $250 for the day. So we booked a hotel room. We reached out to him and his team and said, hey, we see that you're coming to Boston. We'd love to come to the meetup that you're doing, and we have a hotel room. We'd love the opportunity to interview you. And then we went and booked the hotel. If he says no, he says no. If he says yes, we'll have the room. So he ended up saying yes. So we go to this hotel when the day arrives. The closest parking garage is like 15 minutes away for some reason. I don't know why. So we had 2 full big luggage bags with equipment. So we brought mics, we brought lights, we brought our mixer, we brought all the cables, we brought everything, cameras, everything. And we are lugging this. I have 1 bag, Alan has 1 bag, and we're lugging these things through downtown Boston. We bring them to the hotel. Awesome. Take the elevator up. Cool. The hotel room we booked had 2 twin beds or whatever, queen beds, whatever it is. It had 2 beds. And it didn't have enough space for us to do the podcast. So we literally took one of the beds and put it on top of the other beds, dragged the table across, set up the chairs. We actually brought a couple of chairs too, set everything up. And then when Dave came in, he said, oh my God, okay, you guys are serious. You guys take this very, very seriously because you essentially destroyed the hotel room to make this happen. Now, again, we didn't break anything, but we moved a lot of stuff to make this happen. Ended up doing the interview. It went really well. And then he mentored us for like a year or 2 years after that. And we ended up going on his podcast. I couldn't tell you how many times, maybe 20 times, where we would do a coaching call with him. He'd say, hey, can we use this for a podcast episode? Yep, of course. And we got a lot of our audience that way. That was a big way that we got some audience growth over those couple of years. And here's my point with this. When we started this, and when we started doing this full time, we didn't start doing this full time because we had enough money to do it full time. I'm not saying you should do that. Go back and reference the episode where I talk about how you probably shouldn't quit your job to be a podcaster. But what we did do is we invested in the dream, we invested in the business, we invested in ourselves, and we invested in momentum. I can't tell you how many times I see in a Facebook group, somebody says something along the lines of, I refuse to upgrade my Zoom account to a paid one. I refuse to pay for Canva. What's a free alternative? I refuse to pay for a platform to help me find guests. I refuse to pay for a platform to help me get on other podcasts. Now, I'm not saying you should hire a team and spend thousands of dollars a month. That's not what I'm saying. But the mindset of I'm going to do everything I can for as cheap as humanly possible is good from a business perspective. but it's not necessarily good from an investing in you in the podcast and the business perspective. Keeping expenses low is a superpower, 100%. If you can do that, that's great, but not at the expense of the quality. So there's a couple thoughts that we have anytime we're investing in anything. Will it make me better? Will it make me more competent? Will it make our product better? So if we need a new camera, we'll get a new camera, right? Again, within budget. I'm not saying you have to buy the same camera I have or the same setup I have. I'm not saying that. But it's just that mindset of, I'm not going to invest in that. We had a lot of reasons not to book that hotel room. One reason is it was like $200, $250, $275, whatever it was, and we just didn't have that money. It was not an abundant time for Next Level University. Were we growing the business? Yeah, but we also had a lot of expenses that we were working on paying down. So we very easily could have said that. StreamYard, I think we pay like $40 a month for StreamYard or whatever it is. When we started doing video and then everything was virtual, we were using Zoom like everybody else, but it just wasn't high enough quality for me. I wanted something that was better. And that was the best thing I could find. And I said, all right, cool, it's worth investing in. Now, again, I don't want this to be an episode where I talk about stuff that you should be doing from a financial standpoint. I don't mean it that way. $40 a month is expensive. I mean, that's a gym membership. That might be 4 gym memberships, depending on where you go to the gym, right? $40 a month might be your Netflix, your Hulu, and your Disney Plus. I understand, $40 a month, I'm not saying it's no money, but it's more the mindset of, well, you know what? I'll do that when I make money. There's a fine line. There's a fine line because what if you upgrading your quality brings more people and eventually you're able to monetize through that? It's that mindset of, I'm not paying for Zoom. I'm not paying for this. I'm not paying for that. I'll make new artwork when I get money. I'll make new intro when I make money. It's that type of mindset. I'm not saying go spend thousands of dollars. I'm not saying that. That's not necessarily the way to do it. We've made mistakes in that for sure. Let me put it this way. We've made mistakes in that for sure when it comes to podcast growth. There's been a lot of lessons. But when I went to Podcast Movement this year, and it was, I mean, the whole trip was, I don't know, $1,500 or $2,000. I probably could have done without it. Honestly, if I'm being honest, I probably could have done without it. It wasn't a bad event. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And again, it's not necessarily catered for what I'm trying to learn. I think it's catered for somebody who might be newer and they might not know certain strategies and they want to network with other podcasters, right? So that was a lot of money for very low return. But the trips that we took out to California to interview people in person or go to Brendan Burchard events and meet people, it might not have been the most financially rewarding thing, but in terms of growth and evolution and awareness, it was massive. The same thing with that David Meltzer interview. Did we get 1 million listens from that David Meltzer interview? No. Did we make back our money from that interview? No, not directly from it. No. But in other ways, for sure. So it's about, I guess this episode is as much about figuring out what is a smart investment for you in the podcast as it is the mindset behind it. I know other people that just want to throw money at everything and they think that's going to create growth. That's also not true. So that's a mindset too of, well, I'll just pay someone to do this, pay someone to do that, pay someone to do this, and then it'll grow. No, there has to be some level of you in the podcast and in the business. So I guess it's even those two mindsets. They're polar opposites, but I think they kind of achieve the same result or lack thereof. So I guess if I was giving a tactical takeaway for today's episode, it would be sit down and figure out on a scale of 0 to 10, how much are you actually investing into the podcast and into the improvement of the podcast? I'm not saying you got to buy a $1,000 camera or a $500 mic or a mixer. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you have to have a home studio. I'm not saying any of that. But are there things that are going to be a requirement that you just aren't willing to accept. I'll tell you right now, I've been on interviews where the person doesn't pay for Zoom and it kicks off after like 40 minutes. You want to talk about breaking flow. You want to talk about breaking rapport. It's going to be really hard to win like that. And imagine you do get a really big guest. That might break the opportunity for the connection or the relationship. Again, is it the end of the world? No. But it's just the mindset behind it. It's having an investor mindset versus not having an investor mindset. And that's really what we're talking about. Now, I don't want you to invest in stuff you can't afford, because that's not it either. There's really two mindsets. There's the mindset of, I'll invest in that when, and if I invest in that, then. If I invest in that, I guess it would be if I invested in that then, not then, but if I invest in that, it would be then. Then I will get X amount of clients. That's not necessarily true. When I make money, I will invest in that. You might never get to the place where you make money. That's the hard thing to understand, and it's the hard thing to recognize. Where are you in that journey? I don't know.
I just wanted to take a quick second and give a shout out and a huge thank you to Next Level Podcasting Solutions, Kevin and his team. They have been incredible to work with, very flexible, on the spot with any questions that I have or any concerns that I have. When I first started out my podcast, I was doing everything on my own. I have no editing background. I have no podcasting background. I knew nothing about it. And so I was bootstrapping all of this myself while I was still trying to take on my role as a full-time mom. And once I met up with Kevin and we had these discussions and I got on board with adding an editing team, oh my goodness, it just lifted this weight off of me. It lifted my time that I was spending doing my editing. And in the beginning, full transparency, when I was editing just my individual recordings, it was a little more manageable, not super manageable. And then when I started doing my interviews for the podcast, it was hours upon hours of me doing the editing. That didn't include any of the promotional material that I am now getting from Kevin and his team. It wouldn't have been sustainable. I would not have been able to keep up with that. So I recommend Kevin and his team. They have done wonderful work in helping me grow my podcast. I have really enjoyed working with the editing team, and it definitely feels like more of a team environment versus me hiring them to do a specific job. I mean, we all work collaboratively on the projects that I have, and I have these crazy ideas sometimes, and they come up with a solution to fit my needs. I can't recommend them enough. I really enjoyed working with them. Kevin and the Next Level Podcasting Solutions, thank you so much for the work that you have done in the past and are continuing to do for me. I'm growing this community and growing this platform with a beautiful team that is working for me and with me to see my vision and help that come to life. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate you guys.
I was probably somebody who was over in terms of, let's get a custom studio. It'll be $500 a month or $600 a month, whatever it was. Let's do that. We need that. As a podcast, if we want to be taken seriously, we need a custom studio. Probably wasn't true. Was it credibility building? Yes. Was it worth $600 a month or $500 a month? Probably not. Maybe that was too much. But on the other end, there's I'm not going to get any camera. I'm not going to get any mic. What's the cheapest possible mic I can get? Not what's the best budget mic for the quality I'm trying to get. Those are two very different conversations. Because the mic I always suggest is the one that you see over my left shoulder and next to my right arm. I think right now it's like $50. It's a great mic for $50. It used to be $90, and then I think it came down to $70. Great mic. Really good. Bang for your buck. Good budget quality mic. So if you find yourself sitting with that mindset of, I want everything free, I don't want to pay for anything. I don't want to invest in anything. I would ask, is there a way that you can go from maybe a 0 or a 1 or a 2 to maybe a 3? If you're somebody who has the mindset of, I will just put money into all of this and it will make the problems go away, I would ask, what can we do to go from a 10 down to like a 7? The goal is to get to 5. That's balanced. I know I'm going to have to buy some stuff, but I also know I don't have to buy this super expensive stuff because it's not going to make that big of a difference. I think that's the ultimate goal. I want a new camera probably in the next year. This camera is getting old, still great, high quality, but we're ready now where we're probably going to have 2 cameras, and it will have a multi-camera shoot for every episode we do for our brand. I won't do that when I'm going on other shows because that would be a nightmare for them. But it's time for that. It's time to invest in that. I'm not saying the same thing for you. Maybe your camera in this example is upgraded Zoom. Maybe it's going from Zoom to StreamYard. Maybe it's going from Zoom to Riverside, whatever. I'm not saying you have to use anything. Maybe it's going from whatever host you're using to a higher quality host. That's always a thought. Maybe it's going from no Canva or free Canva to a paid Canva account where you have more access to stuff. That type of stuff. That's really what I'm talking about here. If you're trying to minimize expenses, that is a good thing, but you can minimize to the point where it also affects your growth. If you're trying to minimize the amount of work you do, that can be a good thing, but you can do that to the point where it also affects growth. So today's episode is really about finding the middle point in that, finding the right thing for you. Are we going to get out of here before 20 minutes? Probably. My goodness. I don't know if I have any other really good examples because we invested a lot in what we were doing. You know, we were traveling and everything was just going on credit cards. And I don't suggest that. I don't suggest that you say, yeah, we'll figure this out later. I don't think that's a good idea. But I think there's a difference between $0 a month for Zoom and maybe $16 a month for Zoom. If you would spend that $16 to get a new streaming platform, like say you're going to get HBO Max, and you would do that and it's comfortable for you, then that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying, yeah, I could do that, but I'm going to have to cancel everything else. I'm not saying that. Unless you're that dedicated. If you're that dedicated, cool, go wild with it. But I understand that's not sustainable or realistic for most people, honestly. Right? I understand that. But there has to be a level of growth associated, and it's really hard to have that mindset of I'll do that when, because unfortunately, oftentimes the when doesn't happen. A really good example of that is somebody saying, well, I'll start tracking my finances when I make X amount of dollars. What if you not tracking your finances stops you from making X amount of dollars? I'll do the inner work when I find my dream partner. What if you doing the inner work is actually what allows you to find your dream partner? I think it's the same with stuff like this. Well, I'll invest in the house when somebody shows interest in buying it. What if you need to invest in the house long before somebody shows interest in buying it? Same thing with a podcast. It's just not as cut and dry. And it's also, I guess, harder to see your investments paying off. I don't know what buying a new camera will do for me. I don't know. I don't know what spending more time doing editing will do for us. I don't know. I know there's a cost up front associated with it, and my belief is that it will pay off. I think it's the same thought process for you, just on a different scale. Everybody's going to be on a different scale, right? I might be thinking of a camera that's $500 or $700, whatever it is. I think it's like $700, and that's based on the fact that we have a business that makes X amount of dollars, so it's not the same. It's just not the same. But on the other end, we are literally going through our bank account every day and saying, do we even need this service anymore? Like, do we need Dropbox when we have Google Drive? Yeah, let's can that. We'll save $20 a month. Do we really need, how many accounts do we need of Canva? Does everybody need one? Are there only 3 people on the team that need it? All right, cool. Let's go look and figure out what we can get rid of. We're always doing that. The reason we're doing that is because that $60 a month we save can go to $60 a month to something that will help us grow. So that's really, that's it in a nutshell. this is just a further conversation of treating your podcast like a business. When you run a business, let's say, what do we got today? What coffee shop? We'll use the coffee shop. If you're starting and in the very beginning, you realize, these coffee pots we have, they're just not cutting it. They're just not high enough quality for the customer, and they don't differentiate us at all. It's going to be $700 to buy a new nice coffee machine. That's something you're probably going to have to do because that's going to help you serve more people, higher quality product, all that stuff. Is it money up front? Yes. But the idea is, well, this is a necessity in order for me to grow to the level I want to grow to. Again, I'm not saying it has to be $700, just as an example. All right, cool. Anything else? No, I think that's it. I think that's the main point I wanted to touch on today because I just don't want to see your mindset hold you back. This podcast thing is hard enough. This business thing is hard enough. The mindset piece behind it is huge. Again, some of the highest listened to episodes on this podcast have been about mindset. Because at the end of the day, the tactics and the habits and all of that stuff are based on the mindset that you have. You're the person doing all of them. You're the person practicing the habits. You're the person putting the takeaways into effect in real life. Your mindset is what dictates how well you do it, how fast you do it, if you do it at all, how long you do it for before you quit. So self-improvement is everything. It's such a big piece. That's why we have another podcast all about self-improvement. All right, if you are looking for a group of podcasters who are focused on growing and scaling and monetizing and talking about the stuff that matters, I have a podcast Facebook group called Podcast Growth Nation. We'll have the link in the show notes. Would love to have you there. I think right now there's like 55 or 60 people. I'm posting there just about every day, and it'll be similar but different content to what you hear on this podcast. If I have something that comes to mind, maybe I'll throw it in there. I'll probably do a live stream every single week. So I'm recording this on Friday. I most likely will go in there live every Friday, whether it's a Q&A, depending on who's in there, or just something that is top of mind. There will be value in there. I think one of the best ways to succeed as a podcaster is to surround yourself with other podcasters who are focused on their own unique version of success. So that will be what that Facebook group is all about. And then if you feel like maybe you're struggling with this mindset or mindset in general, or the fear of judgment or rebranding or monetizing, whatever it is, I will have my link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. Number one, would love to add value. Number two, I'd love to meet you and figure out what are the things that you are dealing with. And I will start that call off, like I start every single one of them, by saying, based on where you are today and where you aspire to get to, what do you believe is the best use of our time together today? You dictate where that call goes. I don't. I want to add value, and the best way to add value is to figure out what value means to you. So the link will be in the show notes for that. I hope that your mindset is shifting, whatever that means to you. I hope you are feeling more positive. I hope this thing is feeling realer to you. I hope your speaking feels better. I hope your interview skills are improving and the confidence around that is improving. And I hope the people in your life are supporting you and your wild podcast dreams, because I know how important that is. And I promise I will always be there to support you and your wild podcast dreams, because this is a wild dream to have, but it is one of the most fulfilling dreams in the world if you can turn it into a reality. As always, keep on podcasting, keep on crushing it, and I will talk to you all next week.